Imagine this. You are driving home from a basketball game. You are with your 4 best friends. You are happy your team won and you have snacks for the road. The drive should take less than an hour. But you never make it home. Instead, your car is found the next day, abandoned on a remote mountain road far off your route. The car works perfectly. It has gas. It's not stuck. But you and your friends have vanished into the snow. Months later, when the snow melts, the discovery of the bodies only raises more questions. Why did one man starve to death inside a trailer that was fully stocked with food? Why were the others found miles away in rugged terrain they weren't dressed for? And why is one of them still missing? This isn't a horror movie. This is the baffling case of the Yuba County Five. Tonight, on The Unanswered Case, we are walking up that mountain to find the truth. To understand why this tragedy is so perplexing, we have to understand the boys. That's what their families called them. Ted Weiher, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Huell, Hugh Gilbert, and Gary Mathias. These men ranged in age from 24 to 32, but they were all young at heart. 4 of them had mild intellectual disabilities and lived with their parents. They were a tight-knit group, gentle rule followers, the kind of guys who wouldn't deviate from a routine. The 5th man, Gary Mathias, was slightly different. He had served in the army and dealt with schizophrenia, but he was stable on his medication and had become a leader of sorts within the group. On the night of February 24, 1978, they drove Jack Madruga's turquoise Mercury Montego from Yuba City to Chico to watch a UC Davis basketball game. They were excited. They had a big game of their own to play the next day for the Special Olympics. They had their uniforms laid out on their beds at home. They stopped at a convenience store after the game, bought Hostess pies and chocolate milk, and got back in the car to head south, back to Yuba City. It's a straight shot down Highway 99. Impossible to mess up. But they didn't go south. Instead of driving home, the Mercury Montego turned east. They drove past the turnoff for Yuba City and kept going. They drove deep into the Plumas National Forest. This wasn't a small detour. They drove nearly 50 miles off course, climbing from the valley floor up into the snow line. The road they took, the Oroville-Quincy Highway, is treacherous at night. Eventually, the pavement ends and turns to a dirt logging road. Why would Jack Madruga, a man known to be incredibly protective of his car, drive it up a rocky, snow-covered logging trail? When the police found the car days later, the scene made no sense. The car was bogged down in a few inches of snow, but it wasn't truly stuck. The engine started right up. The gas tank was a quarter full. 5 strong men could have easily pushed it free. Inside, the wrappers from their snacks were there. But the keys were gone. And the window was rolled down. They had abandoned a working vehicle, a source of heat and safety, to walk out into the freezing darkness of a blizzard. This is where the first major clue and the first major mystery comes in. A man named Joseph Shans. Shans had gotten his own car stuck up that road earlier that night. While trying to push it out, he suffered a mild heart attack and was laying inside his car in pain with the engine running for heat. He told police that around midnight he saw headlights. A car pulled up behind him. He saw a group of men and a woman with a baby, he claimed, standing in the headlights. He yelled for help. But the moment he yelled, the lights went out. The people went silent. Sean said it felt like they were hiding from him. Later he saw flashlights. Then nothing. Was Sean's hallucinating from pain? Or did the boys see him and run? And why would they run from a man asking for help? A massive search was launched. But a severe blizzard hit the region that very night, burying any tracks. The families waited. The Special Olympics game came and went. Weeks turned into months. It wasn't until June, when the spring thaw finally set in, that the forest began to give up its secrets. And the answers were more disturbing than the disappearance itself. About 19 miles from where the car was abandoned, deep in the wilderness, there was a Forest Service trailer used by hikers in the summer. A group of motorcyclists found a window broken. Inside they found the body of Ted Weiher. This is the part that keeps investigators awake at night. Ted was found wrapped in 8 sheets, his feet frostbitten. But he hadn't died of exposure immediately. His beard growth indicated he had lived for 8 to 13 weeks after disappearing. Here is the tragedy: the trailer was stocked. It had a propane tank for heat full. It had a fireplace and used. It had a locker full of military C rations and dried food, enough to feed all 5 men for a year. Ted weighed 200 pounds when he went missing. When he was found, he weighed 100. He starved to death surrounded by food. They had opened a few cans using a P-38 military can opener, which only Gary Mathias and Jack Madruga, the veterans, would likely know how to use. But they stopped. They never turned on the gas. They never started a fire. Matches were lying right there. The remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found about 4 miles from the trailer, essentially reduced to bones by wildlife. It seems they never made it to the shelter. Huell Gilbert's remains were found nearby as well. But Gary Mathias? His tennis shoes were found inside the trailer. He had apparently swapped them for Ted's leather shoes, which were larger, perhaps to accommodate swollen feet. But Gary himself was never found. To this day he remains missing. What? That is the question that haunts this case. Why starve when there is food? Why freeze when there is heat? Psychologists and investigators have proposed the theory of learned helplessness or extreme deference to authority. Remember, most of these men lived very structured lives. They were used to being told what to do. It's possible that once they were in this terrifying, unfamiliar situation, they reverted to a childlike state. They might have believed the food in the locker wasn't theirs to eat. They might have been afraid of getting in trouble for breaking into the trailer, even though their lives depended on it. Think about that for a moment. These were grown men who followed rules so strictly that they chose death over breaking into a government food supply. The trailer had already been broken into. The window was smashed. They were already inside. But something in their minds told them they couldn't touch that food. But that doesn't explain Gary Mathias. Gary didn't have the same intellectual disabilities. He had army training. He knew how to survive outdoors. He knew how to open C-rations. This brings us to this schizophrenia theory. Gary had left his medication at home. Without it, under extreme stress and suffering from exhaustion, his mental state could have deteriorated rapidly. Did Gary lead them to the trailer, keep Ted alive for a while, and then wander off into the snow in a psychosis-induced state? Or did he try to hike out for help, wearing Ted's shoes because his own were soaked, and perish somewhere in the deep woods where searchers couldn't find him? Some investigators believe Gary opened those first few C-rations for Ted, trying to keep him alive. The fact that a military can opener was used suggests someone with training was there. But then Gary disappeared. And Ted, left alone, couldn't bring himself to open more food. There is one other theory we have to address. Why did they abandon the car in the first place? Why did they drive up that mountain? Some family members believe the boys were chased. If someone frightened them at the convenience store or on the road, they might have panicked. Jack Madruga was a careful driver, but fear makes people do irrational things. If they were run off the road or thought they were being followed, they might have turned up the mountain to escape. Remember Joseph Shans? He said the men went silent and turned off their lights when he yelled for help. If the boys were already terrified, hiding from a bad man who chased them, they might have mistaken Shans for their pursuer. They saw a man in a car on a dark road and thought, "He's found us." So they ran into the woods. A tragic, fatal misunderstanding. This would explain why they abandoned a working car. Why do they walk into the wilderness in street clothes? Why did they keep moving even as the cold set in? They weren't lost. They were running. But running from what? Or whom? No one matching the description of a pursuer was ever found. No evidence of foul play was discovered. The witness who saw a woman and a baby with the men was never corroborated. Was it real? Or was everyone, Shans included, seeing things that weren't there in the dark and the cold? The Yuba County Five case is a puzzle with pieces that don't fit. We have a working car abandoned, a shelter ignored, a slow, agonizing death surrounded by the means of survival. It is a story of 5 friends who stuck together until the very end, walking into the dark because, perhaps, they trusted each other more than they trusted the world around them. What do you think happened on that mountain? Did Gary Mathias wander off for help, or did something more sinister happen? And why did they never eat the food that could have saved them? Let me know your theories in the comments below. These cases are kept alive by people like you asking questions. If you want to support the channel and see more deep dives into the unexplained, please hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe and keep asking questions.